Am I really a monster for not wanting to spend my retirement raising another baby? My son married very young, barely a year after finishing school, and while my husband and I had concerns, he was determined and so was his spouse. Soon after the wedding, they decided she would stay home while he worked, and not long after that, they welcomed a baby boy. During the pregnancy, my daughter-in-law spent a lot of time at my house, which I didn't mind at first. After my grandson was born, the visits continued, and again, I didn't think much of it. I love my grandchildren, and I've raised children before, but slowly, without any real conversation, those visits stopped being visits and started turning into full days of childcare. She began leaving the baby with me for longer and longer stretches. And when I said I couldn't manage certain days, she would get upset or act hurt. Eventually, she started asking every weekend if my husband and I could watch the baby so she and my son could go out. I agreed for a few weeks, until we already had plans of our own. When I said no, she exploded, telling me I was selfish and lacked empathy because she was stuck at home all week as a parent. I felt guilty, so my husband and I rearranged our lives and started watching the baby regularly on weekends, even postponing a trip we had been planning for months. The truth is, we're exhausted. We love our family deeply, but at this stage of our lives, we were looking forward to being partners again, not full-time caregivers. On top of that, my grandson is no longer a newborn. He's crawling everywhere, getting into everything, and it's physically difficult for us to keep up. My husband walks with a limp, and I struggle to bend and lift. What used to be manageable has become painful and overwhelming. When I finally explained this to my daughter-in-law, she brushed it off, saying it was only a couple of days a week. That's when I calmly said that if it was so small, then she could pay us the same way she pays the sitter she recently hired, around $40 a day. I admitted that lately it feels like she only comes around when she needs free childcare. Not to visit, not to share a meal, not to spend time as family. That's when she completely lost it, accusing me of being cruel for even suggesting payment for caring for my own grandchild. Now she's telling relatives that I'm heartless and greedy, and I've been left questioning myself. I adore my grandson, but I didn't agree to raise another child, especially at a point in my life when my body simply can't handle it. I can't tell if I'm standing up for myself, or if I've crossed a line by finally saying out loud what I've been quietly feeling for months. Did I go too far after discovering how she was left alone? I'm still rattled by this, and the more I replay it, the worse it feels. My spouse's cousin, her partner, and their son decided to take a last-minute getaway to a coastal resort in another country. What they didn't bother to do was tell anyone they were leaving behind her great-aunt, an 88-year-old woman who lives alone in their duplex and relies on a walker, medication reminders, and daily check-ins to get through the day. No neighbor was notified, no support was arranged, and no one in the extended family was warned. Less than 12 hours after they left, she realized she couldn't get out of bed. Her phone was barely within reach. She stayed trapped there through an entire night and most of the following day. Terrified and dehydrated, when she finally managed to call, my spouse said I dropped everything, missed our shifts, and drove nearly 8 hours through winter weather to reach her. By the time we arrived, she had been immobilized for close to 40 hours. She was humiliated, in pain, and covered in sores from being unable to move. Seeing someone that fragile apologizing for being a burden nearly broke me. What makes this unbearable is that the cousin absolutely knew we were the closest family and had helped before. We've always said we would. She just didn't want to deal with it before leaving. When confronted later, her response was cold and dismissive, insisting it was only a few days and claiming she assumed everything would be fine. No concern, no accountability, just excuses. I kept thinking about what would have happened if the phone had slipped off the bed. When the family finally addressed it on a group call after they returned, she talked over me, reframed everything I said, and downplayed the damage. That's when I snapped. I said her behavior toward a vulnerable relative was shameful and that I could not imagine abandoning someone who depended on me like that. The call ended abruptly. Since then, several relatives have turned against me, saying my words were too harsh and that I owe her an apology for being disrespectful. What no one seems willing to confront is that an elderly woman was left helpless, injured, and frightened because someone chose convenience over responsibility. Instead of outrage over what happened to her, the focus has shifted to my reaction, as if the real problem is that I spoke up too loudly rather than that this ever happened at all. She ignored every boundary. Now I'm supposed to take it all home? I'm in my early 30s, married, and usually get along well with my husband's mother, though she has a long history of pushing past boundaries while smiling through it. This year we're spending the holidays with my husband's side of the family. And well ahead of time we were very clear about one thing. For our toddler, who's just under 2, we wanted experiences instead of physical gifts. Things like passes to the aquarium, a zoo visit, or maybe a single book to unwrap. He already has more toys and clothes than we can manage. And at his age he doesn't even understand gift opening yet. She was visibly unhappy about this and kept insisting she wanted to buy real presents. Eventually, she asked for an online wish list of practical things we could use later. Even though we truly didn't need much, my husband and I carefully put together a small list and sent it to her, explaining she could pick anything from there if she really wanted to give something. Then this morning everything blew up. My husband casually asked what she'd decided on, since my own mother wanted the list to grab a couple of items too. Instead of answering directly, his mom replied with a joking message about being in trouble, followed by a video. The video showed a massive pile of gifts she'd already bought. None of them were from the list, not a single one. It was all oversized, noisy, space-hogging items she knows we have no room for. Plus a kid's tablet, even though we've been very clear we don't do screens at all. I immediately told my husband that if she wants those things, they can stay at her house. We're not hauling them back with us. To me, it felt incredibly disrespectful to ignore our wishes entirely, especially after asking for a list and then deliberately going against it. It felt less like generosity and more like a power move. My husband thinks we should take at least some of it home so his mother doesn't feel hurt. But all I can think is that doing so just teaches her that our boundaries don't matter and that she can override us whenever she wants. On top of that, we genuinely don't have the space for any of it. So now I'm stuck between keeping the peace and finally standing firm. And I can't shake the feeling that if I give in this time, I'll be fighting the same battle every holiday for years to come. Am I really the villain for expecting my own sister to cover her own costs? I work full-time in an office job and recently found myself driving my younger cousin Maya, her teenage son, and a couple of his teammates across state lines to attend a weekend soccer tournament. And while she generously paid for meals for the other kids even after their parents offered to reimburse her, she acted offended when I asked her to chip in for fuel despite the fact that her own car is barely functional and can't handle long trips. Something I brushed off until a second incident a few weeks later when I drove her and her son to a specialist appointment several hours away, knowing ahead of time that parking at the clinic wasn't free, only for her to casually announce as I pulled into the garage that she hadn't brought any money yet. All and expected me to cover it, which turned into a tense exchange where I pointed out how unreasonable it was to show up to an appointment completely unprepared and insisted she figure it out herself, something she eventually did while making it very clear how stressful I was being. And this pattern has started to feel deliberate given that she doesn't work by choice despite being fully capable of taking a part-time retail job that wouldn't affect her government assistance, leaving me to wonder if my stable income and lack of children has quietly turned me into her default financial safety net, especially after years of covering emergencies, repairs, and travel costs that never seem to end. Am I seriously expected to celebrate Christmas a week into the new year because one couple wants a day off? My wife and I host Thanksgiving and Christmas without fail. Not potluck style, not casual drop-ins, full, traditional, family dinners, the kind that take weeks of planning. My wife handles everything, coordinating schedules, shopping, cooking, cleaning, decorating. I help, but let's be honest, she carries the weight of it. We do this because family matters to us, and because it matters especially to my mom. Having everyone together near the actual holiday is the one thing she looks forward to all year. This year, we did what we always do. We picked a date close to Christmas so everyone could attend. Invitations went out, plans were set. Then my brother called. He told me he and his wife couldn't make it. Not because of illness, not because of travel issues, not because of an emergency, but because his wife might have a long work week starting Sunday and wanted Saturday completely free to rest. And then came the kicker. They said we'd need to move Christmas dinner to January 3rd, over a week after Christmas. That was, according to them, the next day that worked for them. It also happened to be a day my wife and I were off work. I asked what exactly was stopping them from coming on the original date. The answer didn't change. They just didn't want to give up their Saturday. So we tried to compromise. We told them they didn't have to come early. They wouldn't have to help. Dinner would already be made. They could show up in the evening, eat, open gifts, stay for a bit, and leave early. Zero effort required. They still said no. Instead, the expectation was that my wife would redo the entire holiday, replan, reshuffle, rehost, after Christmas, just so one couple wouldn't be mildly inconvenienced. Meanwhile, my mom would once again have to swallow her disappointment about not having Christmas together when it actually matters to her. That's when I finally snapped. Because at what point does being flexible turn into everyone else rearranges their lives for you? At what point does my wife's time, effort, and exhaustion get factored in? At what point does my mom's feelings count just as much as someone wanting a day to relax? I told my brother that moving Christmas to January wasn't happening. That if they wanted to come, even briefly, we'd love to have them. But we were not canceling Christmas for everyone else because they didn't feel like showing up. Now I'm being painted as unreasonable, as if I'm demanding too much, as if wanting to celebrate Christmas around Christmas is some outrageous expectation. So here I am, wondering when hosting, planning, and caring about families somehow became less important than someone else's desire to keep their weekend completely free. Did I completely ruin a new friendship by leaning too hard at the worst moment? I'm a woman in my mid-20s who moved countries for work last year and quickly formed an intense friendship with a colleague a few years older than me. Someone confident and outspoken who felt like the opposite of my people-pleasing, anxiety-ridden self. And when my long-term relationship collapsed right in the middle of the move, she became my emotional anchor. The person I talked to for hours, who listened to every detail, gave blunt wake-up calls, and made me feel less alone while I spent weeks coexisting with my ex in the same house, waiting for him to finally leave the country. The night I dropped him off for good, I went straight to her place, where we laughed, drank, and talked late into the night, and she even gave me a handwritten letter telling me she believed in me and that I'd be okay. Which made the crash that came later feel even worse, because when I returned to my now empty home and texted her about one small, lingering annoyance related to my ex, she abruptly told me she couldn't engage anymore and that I was sharing too much. A sentence that hit like a punch to the chest because my ex had ended our relationship by saying I was too much, sending me into a panic spiral where I couldn't breathe and immediately feared I was about to lose her too. She explained she'd nearly destroyed another close friendship by letting emotional dumping go on too long and was trying to prevent that here. And although I understood logically, emotionally I was shattered, so I asked if we could talk the next day, then sent a careful, apologetic message acknowledging I hadn't realized how much pressure I'd put on her and saying I hoped we could still be close, only to be met with silence. Days of being left on read while upcoming group dinners, work friendships, and shared travel plans loomed in the background, leaving me stuck replaying how just hours earlier she was cheering me on and now I was alone again. Wondering if leaning too hard in the exact moment my life cracked open cost me the one friendship that made the breakup survivable. Am I completely heartless for refusing to fix something that would have only taken 5 minutes? I work as a licensed electrician and I'm part of a union, something I've spent years building my career around. My former spouse and I share custody of our 3 children, and while things are civil now, our split last year was anything but easy. Not long after the divorce was finalized, she remarried a man she'd been seeing for less than a year. I'll call him Derek. The tension really started bubbling up a few weeks ago at my daughter's volleyball game. Derek decided it was the perfect setting to loudly share his opinions about how real tradesmen don't need unions and how union workers are just overpaid and lazy. He said this while standing a few feet from me, fully aware that I was wearing a shirt with my union's logo across the chest. I didn't respond. I just swallowed it for the sake of my kid. Derek works in a loosely related field, doing small freelance tech and networking jobs, but he's not licensed at the level 1 and struggles to keep steady income. Ironically, my certification allows me to legally perform every kind of job he does, and at a significantly higher professional standard. Then, out of nowhere, my ex called me early one morning. She explained that there was an issue with an electrical panel at one of Derek's job sites and asked if I could just swing by and take a look. She framed it as a tiny favor, something that would only take a few minutes, insisting it wasn't a real job and that I'd technically be helping Derek out. She emphasized how easy it would be, how little effort it would take, and how much it would mean to them. I told her calmly that I don't do unpaid work, especially not side jobs, and that union rules require any work I do to go through my shop at a standard rate. I said Derek was welcome to hire me like any other client. That's when her tone changed. She accused me of making things difficult on purpose, and asked if I was really going to cause problems with her husband over something so small. I replied that Derek could hire his own subcontractor or pay me fairly like everyone else does. I also made it clear that I don't offer free labor to someone who openly disrespects my profession. Now I'm being told I'm petty, vindictive, and intentionally creating tension, especially because Derek lives with my kids. Apparently, setting boundaries and expecting professional respect is somehow me starting drama. Meanwhile, I'm left wondering when basic self-respect became something I was supposed to sacrifice just to keep the peace. Did I completely ruin my birthday by saying one honest sentence? I'm a man in my late 30s living with my wife in a quiet European city. And from the very beginning of our relationship we built our life around restraint, planning, and the idea that freedom later was worth sacrifice. Now, we live modestly, save aggressively, avoid unnecessary luxuries, and treat birthdays as small but meaningful moments where we buy each other something personal from our own accounts, something that feels intentional rather than indulgent. A few months before my birthday, my wife shyly admitted she'd been dreaming about an expensive beauty gadget she kept seeing online. It was far outside our usual habits, and while I didn't forbid it, I suggested she do what we always do when temptation hits. Wait a couple of weeks and see if the desire fades. She never mentioned it again, and I assumed the urge had passed, just like it usually does. On my birthday, she handed me a large, carefully wrapped box, The moment I opened it, my stomach dropped. Inside was the exact item she'd wanted for herself. Something I would never use and had never shown interest in. I didn't say anything right away. Instead, I handed it to her quietly, watching her eyes light up as she ran her fingers over it, admired the finish, and smiled in a way that felt deeply familiar, like someone finally holding something they'd long imagined owning. That was when I said it, softly but plainly, that it didn't feel like the gift was actually meant for me. The room went cold, her excitement vanished, her face fell, and she asked why I would even say something like that. After a long, heavy silence, she walked into the bedroom and shut the door, leaving the unopened box sitting alone on the sofa, untouched through the night, like a reminder of a celebration that somehow turned into a quiet standoff neither of us knew how to resolve. Did I really ruin everything by expecting one night to matter? I'm in my mid-20s, and my closest friend and I have always been a package deal. She still clings tightly to a group of old friends from her school days, most of whom now live in different countries and only show up occasionally. I don't dislike them, but they have a pattern. Plans are optional, commitments are flexible, and someone else always ends up picking up the pieces. Last winter, she hosted a holiday night for them after their plans collapsed, and it turned into just the two of us cooking, cleaning, and scrambling while everyone else drifted in and out. She was furious afterward and swore she was done chasing people. So this year, months in advance, I suggested something simple and intentional. My mother had access to a quiet rental in a snowy mountain town, and I offered that the three of us spend the holiday there together. It took real effort to arrange, and it wasn't cheap, but my friend immediately agreed and said she was relieved to have a solid plan. I told her more than once that if she changed her mind and wanted to be with her old friends instead, she just needed to say so early. She promised she wouldn't. Weeks later, she casually mentioned that her old friend group had decided to be in the same town for the holiday. I was surprised but tried to stay positive, suggesting daytime plans and assuring her again that she could back out if she wanted. She insisted she was staying with us. Eventually, my mom even invited my friend's parent and siblings so no one would feel awkward or alone. And she paid for the whole stay. At that point, it felt locked in. Then, out of nowhere, my friend messaged me saying she'd decided to spend the actual holiday night with her old friends. Instead, not asking, telling, she said her own parent was fine with it and assumed everyone else would be too. When I asked what that meant for her family, she explained they'd just stay behind with me and my mom while she went out. She brushed off my discomfort and said it was only one night, and that we'd still have the rest of the trip together. The more she talked, the worse it sounded. She admitted she'd been the one to invite her old friends to town and said she'd feel miserable knowing they were nearby without celebrating with them. She even framed it like she'd done me a favor by agreeing to bring her family along so I wouldn't be lonely, as if I hadn't built this entire plan around her. It felt like I'd been reduced to the safe backup option, the one who organizes, pays, and accommodates, but doesn't get chosen when it actually counts. So I canceled everything. I told her she should go enjoy the holiday exactly how she wanted, without dragging half-kept promises behind her. She seemed relieved, apologized vaguely for not realizing sooner, and then turned it on me, saying I was rigid for not just going along with it and leaving my mother behind. Since then, she's barely spoken to me, acting like I'm the one who blew things up by expecting one night to stay the same. Did I completely betray my family by leaving for a trip after it was cancelled? I'm a woman in my early 20s, and for my milestone birthday this year, my mother promised me a trip. We started talking about it months in advance, tossing around ideas and dates, and eventually settled on a winter getaway to a southern state right before the holidays. She pushed for it to fall during Christmas itself, calling it a special holiday experience, so I agreed, even though it meant rearranging work and plans. By that point, I had already moved out and was living with my partner. We both work full-time, and for weeks we pushed ourselves hard. Extra side jobs, late nights, no days off. Specifically to afford this trip, I requested the time off well in advance, counted down the days, and talked about it constantly. My mother knew how important it was to me and how much effort I was putting in. The plans shifted repeatedly over the months, always at her direction, but I stayed flexible. Then, out of nowhere, I got a call from a sibling asking if I knew the trip was off. I didn't. That's how I found out. My mother hadn't called me. She told one sibling, who told another, and it somehow made its way to me last. When I confronted her, she said everything was up in the air because of family stress, relationship problems, money issues, and the fact that not everyone could attend. Some relatives live out of state now, and suddenly that meant the entire trip no longer made sense to her. No apology, no direct conversation, just a quiet cancellation that somehow skipped the one person the trip was supposedly for. By then, I'd already taken the time off, saved the money, and emotionally committed to going. So I made a decision. I went anyway, just not with her. I went with my partner. Now my mother is furious. accusing me of abandoning the family and choosing a trip over Christmas, even though she was the one who pulled the rug out without telling me. What makes this harder is that this isn't the first time something meant to celebrate me quietly unraveled and turned into something else entirely. I'm left feeling guilty, excited, angry, and exhausted all at once, wondering if I was selfish for still going, or if I finally just stopped letting my plans disappear for everyone else's comfort. Did I ruin Thanksgiving by throwing someone out of a house that wasn't mine? I went to Thanksgiving with my wife and our 14-year-old daughter to a relative's house. Also there were my nephew, his boyfriend, and my cousin by marriage, who has a habit of saying offensive things and calling it just being honest. While I was in the kitchen, my daughter pulled me aside and told me my cousin was being really weird and making the situation uncomfortable. I went to check and found him loudly making homophobic comments toward my nephew and his boyfriend. Nothing physical, but it was clearly escalating, and tempers were flaring. I took my cousin outside and told him he needed to leave. He argued that it wasn't my house and I had no authority. But I stood my ground and didn't let him back in. Later, the host demanded to know where he was. When I explained, she exploded, saying I ruined Thanksgiving and that what he said wasn't that bad. She told me, my wife, my daughter, and the couple to leave and said we might be invited back next year, once we learn to behave. We left and had a surprisingly nice dinner elsewhere, but since then I've been getting messages from family saying I overstepped and had no right to kick anyone out. Now I'm stuck wondering whether I protected people from a situation getting worse, or if I crossed a line by acting when it wasn't technically my place. Did I seriously become the office villain for not decorating my own home? My manager is brand new, barely a few months into the role, and ever since she took over, the vibe at work has shifted from professional to strangely performative. A couple of weeks ago, she announced what she called mandatory overtime and corralled our entire remote team into a 2-hour video call at the end of the day. By the time I logged off, I'd worked nearly 13 hours straight. The following week, we quietly learned the truth. The overtime had never been required at all. It wasn't policy, it was pressure. That alone left me exhausted and wary. Then came the holiday team bonding idea. She asked everyone to send in photos of their home decorations so she could turn it into a guessing game during yet another meeting. There was an unspoken expectation that everyone would play along, smile, and perform enthusiasm. The problem is, I don't decorate, I never have, I don't enjoy it, I don't see the point, and I don't want to buy things just to photograph them and throw them away later. My home is my space, not a prop for workplace morale. Instead of faking it, I answered honestly. I told her I don't decorate and left it at that. I didn't criticize the idea, didn't make a scene, didn't demand special treatment. I just stated a fact. Her reaction was immediate and sharp. She told me I was ruining the game, as if my refusal to stage a festive backdrop had single-handedly derailed team spirit. The message was clear. I should have pretended, lied, or gone out of my way to perform joy for the sake of appearances. That's when it really hit me. After being manipulated into unpaid overtime, now I was being guilted for not decorating my private living space to support a manager's idea of fun. I work remotely. My job performance has nothing to do with how my home looks. I'm not willing to buy decorations, borrow them, or pull a random image off the internet just to keep the peace. Now I'm sitting with this uncomfortable feeling that honesty made me a problem, and that not playing along turned me into the villain. All I did was draw a line around my own home and my own time. Yet somehow that was framed as selfish and disruptive. It makes me wonder how quickly boundaries become offenses when people expect compliance instead of consent. Am I a monster for ruining Christmas by saying no one time? My adult son and his wife have 2 small children, both under 7. I help with childcare occasionally, and we usually get along well enough. The plan this year was simple and already set. They were supposed to come over for Christmas dinner. A few days before Christmas, I got a sudden call asking me to watch the kids for most of the day. When I asked why, I found out they had bought expensive tickets to a professional football game scheduled on Christmas Day. Their original backup babysitter, my daughter-in-law's mother, had canceled because the drive was too long, so I became the last-minute solution. I said no. I told them Christmas shouldn't hinge on me sacrificing my day so they could attend a game, and that maybe the holiday should be spent with their children instead of at a stadium. That was apparently the wrong answer. They immediately told me not to expect them at Christmas dinner at all. Now they're angry. I'm being treated like the villain. And all because I refused to rearrange my holiday so they wouldn't lose money on tickets they chose to buy. So, did I really destroy Christmas by not stepping in? Or am I being punished for setting a boundary? Am I completely out of line for refusing to eat what my own family cooked? I'm a 19-year-old college student studying food science, and I'm currently burned out from non-stop exams and studying. Because of my major, I've learned exactly how foodborne illnesses happen and how quickly unsafe kitchen habits can make people seriously sick. I've tried explaining this at home in a calm way, pointing out small things like washing boards or not leaving food out too long. But my family always laughs it off and says I'm being dramatic or showing off because I'm in college. Everything finally boiled over one night while dinner was being prepared. I watched a family member cut raw poultry and then immediately use the same board for fresh vegetables without cleaning it. When I spoke up, I was told to stop overthinking and just trust that everything would be fine. The idea that prayer mattered more than basic hygiene made my stomach drop. And I realized no one was taking the risk seriously. I refused to eat the meal. That decision instantly turned the situation hostile. I was accused of acting superior, of thinking I was smarter than everyone else just because of my degree. Later, I noticed a large batch of food that had been sitting out at room temperature all night. Knowing it had been in unsafe conditions for hours, I threw it away despite how expensive it was, because the thought of someone getting sick felt worse than wasting money. Since then, the house has gone quiet and tense. One parent feels personally insulted, as if my refusal to eat means I'm rejecting them rather than protecting myself. Another is furious, saying I embarrassed them and wasted food by acting like an expert instead of a family member. I never wanted a fight. I just didn't want to gamble with my health while being treated like the problem for caring. Now I'm stuck wondering if setting a boundary based on what I've learned really makes me unreasonable, or if I'm being punished for not pretending everything was fine. Am I seriously expected to smile at Christmas after my parent drained my entire future? I just turned 18 and live in a northern state where residents receive annual dividend payments from natural resource revenue. Those payments start when you're a baby and add up over time. Once I became an adult, I did what most people my age would do. I asked what had happened to mine. By my math, even without interest or investments, it should have totaled close to $30,000. That's when everything cracked open. When I asked my parent about the money, she brushed it off at first, saying it went toward medical expenses and necessities. That explanation immediately felt wrong. I was double insured my entire childhood and rarely had out-of-pocket medical bills. When I pushed back, her story shifted. She admitted some of the money was used on household expenses, but insisted she would never spend it on anything that didn't somehow involve me. Then things got ugly. Instead of giving me clear answers, she accused my other parent of putting ideas in my head and trying to turn me against her. That wasn't true. No one influenced me. I was simply asking where my money went. Money that could have helped me with school, housing, or just surviving early adulthood. She then told me she struggled financially for years and had no choice but to dip into it. Here's the part that shattered whatever trust I had left. According to the divorce agreement between my parents, any money taken from my dividend account was supposed to be repaid. Despite that legal requirement, when I finally learned the balance, there was barely $500 left. What should have been a safety net for my future is gone. The conversation spiraled after that. Defensive-ness, guilt-tripping, emotional blow-ups. Nothing was resolved. And now, with the holidays coming up, I'm expected to show up for Christmas like everything is normal. Like I didn't just find out that tens of thousands of dollars legally meant for me vanished without accountability. I'm sitting here trying to process betrayal, financial loss, and the weight of starting adulthood with nothing, while being told I'm dramatic for being upset and selfish for not wanting to celebrate. And honestly, I don't know how I'm supposed to pretend this didn't happen. Am I wrong for taking in my cousin and making them pay rent? A few months ago, my 20-year-old cousin called me in a panic. They'd been kicked out of their parents' house after an argument and were being forced to pay ever-increasing fees just to stay there, while their siblings were charged nothing. Their parents blamed them for minor things, including a tiny car scratch, ignoring far bigger issues caused by their siblings. I offered them a place to stay. We packed their things, got their important documents, returned their car, and started fresh. I helped them open a personal bank account, loaned them money for a reliable car, and helped them enroll in community college. They now work part-time, babysit, and teach a small class. Before they moved in, we agreed they'd contribute to household costs, but in a way that actually benefits them. They pay a modest rent that goes straight into savings under their name, contribute to groceries, share insurance costs, and slowly repay the car loan. We calculated their budget together so they could learn independence without being overwhelmed. Their parents found out and went ballistic. They accused me of convincing my cousin to leave, of taking advantage of them, and of being a villain for making them contribute at all. Meanwhile, my cousin is thriving, learning to manage money, and finally has some control over their own life. I feel like I did the right thing for their future, but now my cousin's parents are angry and framing me as a bad guy. Did I overstep by helping them and having them pay their own way? Did I really destroy the family by telling my grandpa why no one calls him? Yesterday I went to my grandparents' house to help them set up their new phones. It was supposed to be simple and harmless. My nana was struggling to read the screen, so we called customer support and I started showing her how to make the font bigger. She was asking questions, trying to understand, clearly overwhelmed but doing her best. That's when my grandpa's mood shifted. He started snapping at her, shushing her every time she tried to speak. At first I brushed it off. This is how he's always been. Short-tempered, easily irritated, always needing control of the room. But then, while I was calmly explaining a setting, he leaned in and told me to shut up. I said no. That was enough to set him off. He stood up, yanked off his jacket, and started yelling that I needed to get out of his house. He threatened to call the police. My Nana grabbed my arm, begging me to stay with her, clearly scared and caught in the middle like she always is. While he was shouting, something in me finally broke. Years of watching him bully people, explode without warning, and then play the victim came rushing out. I told him the truth, that he's cruel, that he's a bully, and that this is exactly why none of his grandchildren call him or want a relationship with him. The room went silent. Later, I found out he told the family his version of the story. An aunt texted me, demanding I apologize because he's old and he didn't mean it. But this isn't a one-time slip. This is a pattern that's lasted decades. Every grandchild has tried to live with him at some point. Every single one of us was eventually thrown out. Sometimes for missing a curfew we couldn't physically meet. Sometimes for not talking enough. Sometimes for reasons so small they barely made sense. He constantly complains that no one calls him, that we're wasting the chance to learn from his wisdom, while ignoring the fear and damage he leaves behind. He believes respect is automatic. He believes being a grandfather entitles him to access, obedience, and silence. All I did was say out loud what everyone else has quietly learned the hard way. I ate up for losing my mind after my roommate wiped out my only safe food. I'm in my mid-20s, working long, exhausting shifts, and food is already a struggle for me. I only have a handful of meals I can reliably eat, and when I find one that feels right, I plan my entire day around it. I've made this clear to my housemate before. I even set a very clear rule. If something has been sitting in the fridge for almost a week, it's fair game. Anything newer than that is off limits. On this particular day, I went completely out of my way between shifts to grab a lemon chicken dish from my favorite spot across town. It wasn't cheap, it wasn't convenient, and I was already exhausted. But I was genuinely excited to eat it later. I ate a small portion, packed up more than half, labeled it, and put it in the fridge before rushing back to work. I spent the rest of my shift thinking about coming home to that meal. When I finally got back late that night, I immediately noticed something was off. One of my 2-day-old snacks was sitting out on my housemate's desk. Half eaten. I said something, reminding them I was planning to eat it the next day, and they brushed me off, saying it was old anyway. That's when I opened the fridge and realized the lemon chicken was completely gone. When I asked about it, they casually told me they ate it. No warning, no message, no hesitation. This was despite the fact that there was still plenty of other food in the fridge they'd already helped themselves to earlier. I tried explaining that I had just bought that meal, that I'd been saving it after a brutal shift, and that I now didn't have dinner at all. I was met with a shrug. Later, after I stepped out to cool down, I got a text saying they'd replace it sometime. No apology, no acknowledgement of how upsetting it was, just a vague promise. While I stood there hungry, tired, and furious, staring at an empty fridge where the one thing I could actually eat had been. Now the house feels tense, and I'm being treated like I overreacted, but I genuinely feel like something important was crossed. Am I a monster for refusing to hand over the last piece of the man I lost? More than a decade ago, when I was in my mid-20s, I survived a horrific accident that took the life of the man I was supposed to marry. We were together in the car. I walked away with minor injuries. He never made it out. The aftermath shattered me. I spent years cycling through therapy offices, grief groups, and long stretches where simply getting through the day felt like work. Eventually, through one of those support groups, I met my current partner, a widower who had also lost the love of his life. We understood each other in a way few people could, and after years of friendship, we slowly built something new. Recently, we took the step of moving in together. Throughout all these years, I stayed close to my late partner's family. They were my lifeline in the beginning, and I believed we had built something lasting out of shared loss. That belief cracked when his mother called me last week and calmly asked me to return my engagement ring now that I was moving on. She said she wanted it back to keep it in the family. As if the ring had always belonged to them. It hadn't. We chose it together. It wasn't a diamond or an heirloom, but a custom piece with stones tied to our birthdays. Something he saved for and surprised me with because it felt personal and right. That ring carries memories that are painful, yes, but also full of love, joy, and the life we planned. I no longer wear it on my left hand, but it hasn't been hidden away either. I wear it openly on my right, just as my partner wears his own wedding band. In our home, both of our past loves are acknowledged without shame or secrecy. Their photos sit on our shelves, not as ghosts, but as parts of who we are. My current partner has never once felt threatened by this, and neither have I. We honor what was while still choosing what is. When I explained this, his mother doubled down. She said the ring mattered because it was one of the last significant things her son ever bought. As if my connection to it was secondary. The conversation spiraled until I was shaking, overwhelmed, and hurt enough that I ended the call. Since then, I've avoided her attempts to reach me. My partner is furious on my behalf, convinced I'm being punished for surviving and finding happiness again. My own parents are split, one urging compassion for a grieving mother, the other reminding me that the ring was a gift, freely given, and still mine. Now I'm left sitting with this heavy, familiar guilt, wondering when remembrance quietly turned into obligation, and whether loving someone new means I'm expected to give up the last tangible proof of a love that shaped my entire life. Am I the villain for canceling my son's birthday over $10? I, 34F, spent weeks planning what I thought would be my son's most memorable birthday yet. He's turning 13, a big milestone, and money is tight, so I stretched myself to make it special. I rented batting cages for the kids, ordered a cake, planned snacks and games, and even organized a scavenger hunt outside with a small cash prize to make it exciting. I wanted this birthday to feel magical, even though we're not wealthy. A few days before the party, I pulled out the $20 I had set aside for the scavenger hunt prize and separated it into 4 $5 bills. Later that day, only my son and one of his friends were in the apartment while I was briefly working in my room. When I returned, I noticed my wallet and purse were open in a way that's not normal for me. That's when I saw it. $10 missing. I immediately confronted my son. He swore he didn't take it. I asked about his friend. Same answer. Here's the thing. My son has never stolen anything. But he has lied about small things before. I've caught him sneaking snacks and telling little fibs. And it's been a recurring issue. I wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt. But everything pointed to him knowing what had happened. I couldn't ignore it. This wasn't just $10. It was a lesson in trust and honesty. After arguing, discussing, and trying to get to the truth, I realized I couldn't in good conscience let him have the party. If he did take the money and I let the celebration go on, I'd be rewarding dishonesty and sending the message that lying has no consequences. So I made the gut-wrenching decision to cancel the party entirely. Now my son is devastated. He's heartbroken that his milestone birthday is ruined, and I can't stop feeling guilty. Part of me wonders if I overreacted over $10. But another part of me knows I had to stand firm. I wanted to teach him a lesson he'd remember. But at what cost? Did I destroy my family by telling the truth about a child's father? I'm a woman in my early 20s, and for most of my life my older sibling has been protected and excused by our remaining parent. No matter what he did, that pattern finally exploded into a full family rift when a custody case dragged all of us into court. Years ago, my sibling was in a long-term relationship with his partner, and they had a young child together. During that relationship, I became very close to his partner and deeply involved in the child's life. Even after they separated, I stayed present, helping with childcare, school routines, and emotional support, essentially becoming one of the few stable adults the child could rely on. When the child was still a toddler, my sibling walked away. He moved out, stopped contributing financially, rarely checked in, and eventually vanished altogether after starting a new relationship. His former partner struggled, but she carried everything alone and built a stable life for her child without him. For years, my sibling would disappear for long stretches, offering no consistency and no real support. Then, suddenly, he came back. Instead of apologizing or trying to rebuild trust slowly, he demanded personal information and threatened legal action. His former partner had relocated to protect her stability and asked me not to share her details, which I respected. When my sibling confronted me, I refused, telling him that if he truly wanted to be involved, he needed to take responsibility and follow proper legal steps. He accused me of betrayal and claimed I was choosing an outsider over family. Eventually, he located her on his own and filed for custody, demanding far more responsibility than he had ever shown before. I was asked to testify, and I told the truth, that he had been absent for years, that the child's other parent had been the only consistent caregiver, and that his sudden return coincided with his desire to present a polished image. The court limited his request, prioritizing the child's stability. Since then, my sibling has cut into me relentlessly, insisting I should have lied or stayed silent. Our parent agrees, telling me I ruined his chance at redemption and that loyalty should come before honesty. Even when a child's well-being is involved, I don't regret protecting a child who needed stability, but being frozen out and blamed by my own family has left me wondering how telling the truth turned me into the villain.